Okay, so I think we're probably going to go ahead and get started then, guys. So for those who are joining us, thank you. We're very excited to be here. We have an award-winning author, Lucy Christopher. She does a lot with mystery. I love to say murder, mystery, and mayhem. And then we joke around that Storm Wake is magical mystery. So beautiful writer, beautiful stories, and I can't wait to hear what she says. For those who are on, what we're going to do is Lucy's going to speak for a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and we have a room of participants here, and any questions we're going to go ahead and put in the chat. So go ahead and, listen, and then think of any questions and throw them in there and we'll go through them. Okay. All right, Lucy, we're going to go ahead and give it off to you then. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, it is absolutely wonderful to be here in virtual zone. I am so thrilled to be part of your amazing Teen Book Fest. I've looked at your website and I've looked at your program and it looks fantastic. I think if you're going tomorrow, you're going to have such an amazing day. And I'm a little bit jealous. I wish I was there too. But it is still absolutely wonderful to be here with you in this virtual space. So thank you so much for having me. What I'm going to do is talk for a little bit about me as a writer, the kinds of things that I write and the kinds of places that I get my inspiration from. Because I'm a little bit of a strange writer, I think, in how I get my inspiration. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. And I thought I would also try to give you my writing process in a little nutshell, so that when you go away today, you've got a few ideas about maybe a different way to start writing that you can take away and apply to your own writing. So I'd love you guys to interact in the chat if you want to. You can tell me things, you can answer things. I wish I was there to see all your gorgeous faces and to interact in person, but in lieu of that, we're going to have to use the chat. So if you are a writer, then please feel free to tell me in the chat what kind of stuff you love to write. I'd love to hear that. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. And then I will talk a little bit for about, 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes or so. And then we will give you guys a bit of time for questions too. Oh, and also if I have time, I'm even going to try and give you a little bit of a chance to write, maybe scribble a bit of writing. So if you've got a pen and paper nearby, grab it, put it close to you. It's only going to be a couple of minutes of writing. If you don't, doesn't matter. You can imagine yourself writing and what you might write about. But I'm just going to very quickly lead you through how I would begin a writing process every day that I write. So this is me, Lucy Christopher, and these are some of the things I do in these pictures over here. It kind of looks like I'm teaching a horse to read, which is, I'd love to be able to say I teach horses to read. That would be a really cool skill. But I'm actually, in that picture, I'm leading a writing retreat in Mexico with another writer called Melvin Burgess. And that is something I do quite a lot of. I do quite a lot of tuition of writing retreats, teaching students in school, and I love it. It's one of the best bits of my job. The other thing I do a lot of, apart from write, is work in a university. And I have worked many, many, many years in the UK as a leader of a creative writing course. And I'm just about to start work in another university in Tasmania, in Australia, where I will also be beginning a PhD in creative writing for students. And speaking of PhDs, you can see me there looking like a giant blueberry. I have a bit of a habit of dressing like giant berries. You'll see in a minute, there's another berry coming up, but here I am looking as like a blueberry. This is my official PhD outfit. And that was me getting my doctor in creative writing. So all of you who have parents who say, well, we want you to be a doctor when you grow up, you can also be a doctor in creative writing. How cool is that? So that's me. These are my books. And I have written all sorts of different types of books for all sorts of different types of ages. And the books on the left-hand side are books for little people, for preschoolers, my picture books, The Queen on Our Corner and Shadow. And then as we go through, there are some books for middle grade. Flyaway is probably my most well-known middle grade book. And then there's some YA books on the end. And of those books, I would say Stolen is probably my most well-known book, certainly in the States, because it won a Prince Honor Award. And then the book on the other side of the page is a book called Release. And that is my first adult book. And that book is about to be released, and it will be released in June this year. And it's actually a companion book to Stolen. So if you've read Stolen, imagine that those characters are now adults 10 years later, and I've written an adult book with those same characters. So we'll talk a bit about that later. And if you want to, you're very welcome to put in the chat if you've read any of my books, and what you thought, or maybe not what you thought, what you thought. If you liked it, you can put it in the chat. So they're my books. What I'm going to talk about now is how I start to write. And again, if you fancy telling me in the chat how you start to write, I'm always really, really interested in this, because I've been teaching creative writing to students for a very long time now, probably over about 15 years. And I'm always asking my students, what is it that inspires you to start writing? Is it that you have a character and you want to tell their story? Is it that you have a plot, a story that you want to tell, or an idea or a theme that you want to get your teeth into and explore? Or are you one of those weird writers like me that starts with setting? Because as I said, I've asked this question so many times to so many different writers, and definitely there's far fewer answers that are, yes, I start with a place, with a setting. But if you start with setting, high five, you're my friend. I also start with setting, and we are special and unique. And how I start with setting is also wrapped up in the fact that I like to daydream. Yay, Penny starts with setting. So if you are a daydreamer, if you are a procrastinator, we might have a few of you around today, do not be ashamed of those things. In fact, be very proud, because there's been quite a lot of recent studies that have come out that are proving that if you like to daydream, if you like to procrastinate, you also have a greater tendency to be creative, because your brain is working in a sort of sideways way. You're thinking of all sorts of other things rather than the task you're supposed to be thinking of. So I actually think daydreaming and procrastinating are both very, very useful tools for being a writer. And that is how I start my process. I start by thinking about a place, first of all, and I just start by paying attention to the places that are on my mind, and then daydreaming about those places. And then I try to research those places and go to those places. And from there, from that daydreaming, from that research, from that thinking, that's where my story comes from. That's where my characters come from. But it comes from the place first. And I thought we would talk a little bit about this book in particular, because it was my first book. It's probably my most well-known book. And as I said, I've got this companion novel coming out very soon that's related to that. And Stolen, this book, absolutely came from setting, absolutely came from place. And Stolen has a very unique setting. It is this place. So this is the Great Sandy Desert in Western Australia. That's a pretty good name for a desert, isn't it? If you're going to have a desert, it's great, it's big, and it's sandy. The Great Big Sandy Desert. And I wonder, this might not work if my bandwidth is being a bit problematic, but let's see. This is a little video to give you just a little snippet of what Stolen is about.
You saw me before I saw you. You had that look in your eyes, as though you wanted something from me, as though you'd wanted it for a long time. You drew me toward you, and you stole me away.
Lucy, are you there? Did we lose you? Uh-oh, party people. Let's give Lucy a second. I think the bandwidth may have gotten a little strange. Oh, she's going to come back on. We'll give it just 2 seconds. Yeah. Oh, there she is.
Yes.
I'm so sorry, everybody. I don't know.
Don't worry about it. We were in Zoom, what I'd like to call Zoom educational hell last year. So we are well aware of the issues and limitations. So don't even worry about it. You get all set up and we'll be good to go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So as I was saying, this Stolen is about a girl called Gemma who is kidnapped and taken to this place, the Great Sandy Desert. And she is taken there by a man called Ty, and Ty expects her to fall in love with him, but he also expects her to fall in love with the desert itself. And it's quite a hard-hitting, controversial story. It's a lot about coercive control and sort of the boundaries of what's right and what's wrong, and how you sort of navigate those really difficult feelings of love and survival and being controlled. But weirdly, in a very weird way, that book didn't come from me thinking about those big, deep themes. It actually came from me thinking about this place, this desert. And those big themes and the story came second to the place. And so it's really proof that you can still have quite a big, meaty, controversial story by starting with a place rather than the theme itself. So if you struggle and you get panicked thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know what to say, I need to write a big, scary story or a big, amazing, important story, and you're a bit overwhelmed, that's okay. Don't worry. Being overwhelmed is part of being a writer as well. But a little thing that might help you is you could just focus on one element. So perhaps you could focus on the setting and find out everything you could possibly find out, and daydream as much as you can daydream about the setting. And then maybe, hopefully, with a bit of magic, the story will come as well. So that's where the book is set, up there, right in the middle of desert. There's not much else but desert up there. And it's not, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm half Australian as well as half British. And I grew up in Australia. And I remember very, very clearly moving from the UK to Australia when I was about 9 years old. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. It was too hot, too dangerous. Everything was out to eat me or kill me or get me. And I did not want to be there at all. I didn't have any friends either. I had a very weird Welsh accent at that time. I used to spend a lot of time in the library at school. My school lunch times were in the library, partly because it had air conditioning and it was very hot. And also partly because there were books in there and there were friendly, wonderful people, including some amazing librarians who really helped me to come to terms with my new place. So I read a lot of Aussie books, Australian books, when I first moved to Australia. And I also started to explore the land. And remember, you saw a picture of me looking like a giant blueberry in my PhD outfit. So here I am. I think I'm looking like a giant cherry over here on a rock in the bottom corner. I had terrible fashion sense, but this was me starting to explore the new land that I'd come to, and started for the first time in my whole life, started to really get excited about a place, but also very scared about a place. And that sense of being both excited and terrified about a particular place was very powerful for me and stayed with me all through my teenage years to when I became a writer. And now when I'm looking for an inspiration for a story, I think about places that excite me, that terrify me, and even better still, that do both. So if I can find a setting that is both scary and exciting, that's where my true inspiration comes from. So this was me looking like a cherry as a teenager. These were some of the Aussie books that I read as a teenager. And I looked back on them actually when I did my PhD in creative writing. And I noticed that a lot of those early books that I read were about land, were about kids and animals adapting to an Australian landscape. And it was me, it was my journey too. And they were the books I read. So pay attention also to the books you're reading. as a young person, as a person, because often the books that you're reading are reflecting the things that you want to say or you want to think about as well. So just keep a little curious part of your brain open, because some of your ideas will come from your reading. There's a great quote that reading is breathing in and writing is breathing out. So that reading part is really, really important for inspiration. So this is what I did when I researched the book, Stolen. I went to the place and I spent a lot of time sitting in the desert, making lots and lots of notes, writing a lot about what I thought about the desert, a lot about what was there, and a lot of daydreaming about what could happen in this landscape. What would be the most exciting thing that could happen here? What would be the most scary thing that would happen here? And I kind of thought, well, the land itself for me is very exciting. There are camels, there are kangaroos, they're the most crazy flowers, as you can see over there. They're sort of alien flowers that pop up in the middle of the sand. And then I thought about what would be scary. And this is a desolate, empty landscape. Getting lost would be scary. Having no water would be scary. But also being trapped with someone who is scary in this place would be very scary. So that's how I kind of got the idea. However, our kidnapper is not your usual kidnapper. Gemma gets kidnapped because she's initially quite attracted to Ty, and he's very good looking. And so there's this weird sort of sense of again, that sort of push-pull going on through this novel. Stolen's gone out into the world and has been published in lots and lots of places. It's gone to, I think, 25 countries now, and these are some of the covers. And I just put them up here because I think, I always like looking at book covers, they're gorgeous. But I think it's particularly interesting with this book, Stolen, because so many of the covers have changed from the original cover. So you can see the original one is the black with the orange butterfly right in the middle. But so many of the other countries picked a different cover or worked with a different cover. And lots of them went with the idea of the land as the main image of the book. Or they went with the idea of this sort of dark sort of relationship, this dark theme in the book as well. So I think that's quite interesting too. So that's kind of how Stolen came out from a place. But it's not just Stolen, there's my other books too. This book, Flyaway, came from this setting. This is a wetlands preserve in Wales. And I was working there. I worked as a bird guide with little kids. So you could probably, and maybe you can imagine me often dressed as a giant bee or a butterfly, and with lots of 5-year-olds behind me going, oh, look, there's a duck. Oh, look, there's a swan. And that was where I was working. And I was there every day. And I really got a sense of how important nature and wild places could be to, in my case, small children, and how magical they could be. And I wanted to write a book about how magical nature could be. And I decided to set it where I was spending every day. So that was Flyaway. Then this one came along. This one, I'm just looking at what my chat says. The John Marsden series, Jeanette. Yes, they are awesome. They are truly awesome. This book, The Killing Woods, was my third book. This was my hardest book to write. This is a really dark book, and it's about darkness. It's about how do we navigate really dark feelings, and how do we, if we're part of a community, how does a community move forward when something quite bad and quite dark has happened at the heart of the community? How do you come back from that? How do you find the shafts of light in the dark places, as it were? And in fact, Dark Places was the title of this book for quite a long time. And this book I was really stuck on. I originally wanted to write a book set in a rainforest in Africa. And I went to Africa and I did my research and I came back with lots of notes, and I couldn't write the book, and I got really, really stuck. And I never believed in writer's block until this book came along. And I decided again to say, okay, so what's the setting that's around me? I went right back to where my original inspiration came from, place. I wanted to write about a wood. I wanted to write about darkness and light. And I spent a lot of time walking around this particular wood, which was near where I lived at that time. And the book became same story, more or less, but it moved from Africa to this wood. And that was because I would write, I would walk into the wood and I would write bits of the book on a notebook every day as I walked along. So that was that book. Then this book, Storm Wake, this one came because I was sick of thinking about woods. I had been writing The Killing Woods for about 3 years, and I was very, very, very sick of woods. So the last thing I wanted to do was write anything to do with a wood ever again after that book. All I wanted to do was to be near open places, the sea, sunshine, and I paid attention to that daydreaming. I paid attention and thought, okay, I want to write about something that is open and sunny and light, and that is where Storm Wake came from. So you can see me doing my initial writing, and as I said at the beginning, my process begins with lots and lots of free unconscious writing. So there are no rules in my free unconscious writing. I can just write. And that's me just free unconscious writing about that place. So that place where I'm writing is an island with the best name ever called the Scilly Isle. It's not spelt S-I-L-L-Y, but sounds like the Scilly Isle. And I wrote about it. And I also remembered that I loved The Tempest, the Shakespeare play The Tempest, when I was at school, but I always thought that the girl character in there never got a good enough part. So Miranda is her name. I wanted to rewrite The Tempest with Miranda, who is a teenage girl with a lot to say. I wanted to put her right at the heart of my book. So that's where that story came from. And then, oh, I'm glad that my picture's good again now. Then I went to this book, Stolen 2, it was called in my computer for a very long time. And Stolen 2 became Release. And this is the book I always thought I'd never write, but always wanted to write. So this is the book that came about because Gemma and Ty from Stolen just wouldn't get out of my head. And I have had many emails about Stolen, but the most common email question I get is a question that says, what happens next? What happens to Gemma after the book? What happens to Ty? And it made me wonder, and I've been wondering ever since. And of course, I'm a daydreamer, so I would think about, okay, what's happened to them? Where would they be? What would their life be like? Would it be difficult? Would it be bad? It probably wouldn't be good. How would someone who has suffered great trauma as a young person be able to move forward and deal with that? How would that affect them as an adult growing up? It probably wouldn't be all happy ever after. I also used to get a lot of people writing fan fiction about Stolen, and some of it was fantastic, I have to say. And I thought, well, if they're going to be writing about the future of Stolen, then I want to have a chance as well. So I started to write the book, but I knew it had to be an adult book. I knew that because the characters would be adult, but also because I wanted to deal with some deeper, darker, more controversial themes that I thought was better suited for an older audience. And also something really important had happened between Stolen and Release. And that is, you may have heard of the Me Too movement, where lots of women came forward and started speaking their truth about coercive control and abuse. And it made me think, okay, I'm thinking about Stolen in a slightly different way. And I'm thinking about how a girl who'd had that experience, how she would grow up and how she would deal with that. And I wanted to write as truthful as I could response to that too. So it's quite a different book to Stolen, but it still has the desert at its heart. And the other thing that really intrigued me about going back to Stolen was the land, because the land itself in Australia has changed in that 10 years since writing Stolen and writing Release. The land has become mined. There's a lot more mining going on in the desert now. There's a lot more towns in the desert. There's a lot more environmental destruction and climate chaos in that desert. It's a lot of erosion. And my opinion had changed of the desert. So when I first wrote Stolen, I was living in Australia. I felt very Australian. It was my land. Now I've been living in the UK for most of the last 10 years. So I felt like maybe the desert wasn't quite my land in the same way. And I was interested in that, how an author's perception of place can change the book and change the theme. So that's how Release came about. So what I want to do now, is just talk for just a couple of moments about my writing process and then hopefully get you guys to ask some questions as well. What's in my, oh, there's already a question. Thank you, anonymous attendee. I will answer that in just a second. But just before we get there, and if you've already got a question, then feel free to pop it in the Q&A already, and I will get to them. It's great that there's already a question there. But just before that, my writing process, you can probably already get a feel for it. It's very playful, it's very intuitive, and it's very based in place. So the first thing I do is do lots and lots of free unconscious writing. So that, as I said before, is a process of writing that's the easiest process of writing, because there are no rules whatsoever. The only rule, well, there's one rule actually. The one rule is that you have to keep writing. Doesn't matter what it is. You can write the same word over and over again. You can write, I don't want to do this, I'm bored, this is rubbish, blah, 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 blah. That's fine. But you just have to keep writing. And how I do this to focus my thinking is I would be aware of what's that place that I want to write about at the moment. What's the place that's sort of pulling on my daydreaming brain a little bit. And I can tell you at the moment that I haven't started a word of it, but I keep thinking about an apple farm. I really, really want to write about an apple farm. I've no idea why, but I just want to write about an apple farm. So what I know that I will be doing in the next couple of weeks is exactly this. I will be getting myself a nice new notebook, and I will be writing on every day for about 5, 10, maybe 20 minutes, some unconscious writing. And I might put at the top of the page, apple farm, and I'll set a timer, got 20 minutes, 10 minutes, however many minutes I've got. And I will just let myself write whatever I want to write about apple farm in this case. And I will do that every day. And I will do that every day until ideas start to come. And I guarantee that ideas will start to come, because we have amazing brains that get bored very easily. So our brains want to move on to things, they want to do things, they want to tell stories. So what I would urge you to do, either you could maybe set this as a little homework for yourself, but if you've got a little piece of paper next to you and a pen, I just want you to write down a setting. So any setting that's pulling on your brain, or the first one that you think of, doesn't matter. First one that you think of, could be where you're at the moment. It could be a place that you go to every day. It could be somewhere that you're excited by or scared by, or both excited and scared by. Just write that on your piece of paper and just have a couple of seconds just to write a little sentence, anything you want, or anything, just write words, whatever you want, a little bit of unconscious writing about that setting. And if you don't have a piece of paper next to you, you can daydream about your setting. And remember that this is what I would do every time I begin writing. Every day, every new book. What's in my mind about that place? And I would do this for quite a few weeks, really. And I would probably be starting to write more formally as well, but I would still be keeping that process of unconscious writing going too. Then my next stage would be to do the research. And I put this in inverted commas, and well, rabbit ears, because lots of proper academic writers don't consider this research, but I do. By research, I mean that I go to my place if I can, if it's a real place and if it's possible to go to. If I don't, I go to my place in my mind and I research it. And by research it, I write down as many things that I know or imagine about that place. So I would have a big long list of everything that I can see, in that setting. And in that setting, in that big long list, I would be putting things like the colors of the land, or if it could be inside as well, and the kinds of people that are there, the kinds of things that people wear, the kinds of trees, the kinds of weather, as many different things as I could see. I would also be writing as many different things that I can hear in that setting. And as many different things, you can see where I'm going here, can't you? As many different things as I can smell, as many different things as I could taste, and as many different things that I can feel. So I really get those sensory details, as many as I possibly can, onto my page, into my notebook. And there's many important reasons for this, but one of them is if I'm stuck, and I'm stuck writing, which happens all the time, never be afraid of getting stuck, it's part of writing. I go back to my notebook of research and remember, oh, it smelled like this. Oh, it sounded like this. Oh, that was there. And that might give me a new little jump start into the scene. It also is important to get those sensory details right, because there's been some amazing studies that have gone on that have tracked how people's brain reacts when they read a book. And if the author has written a smell that is really well written, or the reader can identify with, the part of the brain that says, okay, person, please smell now, will be lighting up, and that reader will actually be using their nose to smell. And if you imagine if your book is connecting your reader through their nose, through their ears, through great sounds, through great textures, through all of that good stuff, your reader is really well embedded in that story. So sensory details, really important. The next bit of research I would do is what I call big picture thinking, and it's basically finding the story. And again, it comes from daydreaming about what could happen in this place. What would be the most exciting thing that could happen in this place? What would be the most scary thing that could happen in this place? What could be the most surprising thing that could happen in this place? Could any of them be all three of those things at once? And doing a bit more imaginative free writing about that, seeing if a story might come out of it. And I would do lots and lots of writing. So there's lots of people that write. There's two types of writers, basically. There's the planners and there's the pantsers. So there's those that fly by the seat of their pants. And I think I'm probably much more of a pantser. I like to feel my way along and see what's there, rather than find what's there first and then write it. So my process is slower, but I think it's more fun. And then I write and I write and I write and I write and I write, and I'm a rewriter. So I will do 10 drafts often of a story before it feels close to finishing. And I kind of creep up on my stories. And that's how I do it. But it comes from daydreaming about place and about what could happen in that place at the core. So that's something that you guys can try in your own writing. And I'd love to know how you go with it, and if you manage to get a story out of a place. And I'm going to hop on to that lovely question that's waiting for me. But if anyone else has a question, now's the time to pop it in your Q&A box. And I also just wanted to finish with this little quote, well, quite a big quote, but a really important one about my process and about what I think writing could and should be about. And that is the idea that writing is about failing better, practicing, and also having a beginner's mind. And this very smart guy, Mr. Suzuki, says that in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. And what he basically means by that in the beginner's mind, you have a much more open sense of what could happen, and you can be much more adventurous and much more creative. If you're not afraid of failing, if you understand that failing is just part of the process, that failing is just practicing, really, that's when we really learn something. So to be a true beginner is to be a writer, and to always realize that part of writing is about being scared and about being overwhelmed and thinking, I can't do this. This is too hard. I can't write 80,000 words of a novel. But then having that little flip that goes, well, let's just see. Let's see. This might be fun. I might learn something. I might do something new. Let's see what happens. And I think that for me anyway, that is the most helpful thing when I write, to forget about the publishers, to forget about the book sitting on a bookshelf or anything like that, is to just think about the words on the page and playing with them. And some of it will go wrong, but some of it will be really interesting, and some of it will be really surprising. And for me, being a beginner is about being a writer as well. So don't forget that. And there's my dog. So I'm going to stop this now, and I want to answer your questions. And I know there's a nice one here from anonymous attendee. Thank you, anonymous attendee. How long does it take you to write a book? That is a great question. And it takes me lots of different amounts of time, if I'm perfectly honest. And I am actually quite a slow writer as well, because of this process is part of the reason I'm quite slow. But to give you an idea, I think Stolen took me just over a year and a half, I think. Killing Woods took me 3 and a bit years. So in between a year and a half and 3.5 years is how long it takes me to write a book. And not all that time, so say if it's 3 years, not all that 3 years would be writing every day, 8 hours a day. It would just be having some really intense periods where I would be writing every day for 8 hours and be really, really intense. And then there would be some weeks where I hardly write at all, or I just keep a little notebook of ideas or thoughts and come back to it. Or some days I just do a little bit of writing and a little bit not. And that is because I do my academic work as well, and I do my teaching of writing. So I can't write every day practically, but I also think it's a good thing for my mind, because whenever I have a long period of writing every day, it's very, very intense. And I go a little bit tunnel vision. So the only thing I think about is the book and writing. And I think I'm probably terrible to live with around this time, because all I'm thinking about is, what would my character do? Someone asks me a question, my thought would be, how would my character answer that question? Which isn't very helpful when someone's just asked you if you want a cup of tea or something. Oh, what would my character say? What kind of tea would she like? So I'm quite intense. I work quite well by being quite intense on things. So I would take a good few years, but not all of those few years would be very intense on the book, if that makes sense. Here are some lovely questions. Jennifer, thanks so much for being here. Oh, you're very welcome. Teach English, and I'm thrilled to hear from you. I've heard authors talk about how their characters have to have flaws. How do you go about giving your characters flaws, and how do you not feel guilty while doing it? How do you make sure their growth is realistic? That is a fantastic question, Jennifer, and a tricky one to answer quickly, because that could be a whole lecture actually. How do I give my characters flaws, and how do I not feel guilty? I do a few things. So something I do quite early on. So yes, my process is about being very intuitive and writing and rewriting, but I am a planner at some points. And I usually do this process of writing intuit, write until I get terribly, horribly stuck. And it always happens. And I always have a period where I get stuck and think, oh no, why am I writing? I can't write this book. I'm so stuck. I should give up now. And that only means I need to plan. And when I plan, the things that I think about are character flaw often and character motivation. They go together often, and what is going to happen at the end of the novel. So when I get stuck, I go straight to the end of the novel often, and I will write the end. And what's in the end of a book is the most, often the most precious nugget of the whole story. So if you're studying a novel in class, look at the end, look at the last chapter, look at the last page, look at the last paragraph. Often what the author really wants to tell you in that book is there. That's the nugget. And I think about, okay, how do I want my character to end up? Do I want them to succeed, or do I want them to fail? If I want them to succeed, I have to have them get what they want. If I want them to fail, then I need to really think about that flaw, and it's the flaw that's going to make them fail. And they're often opposite. So with Gemma, or they're opposite and the same sometimes. So with Gemma in Stolen, she really wants to love and to be loved, but then her flaw is that she loves, actually. So often they're very entwined. What a character wants, the motivation, and what's going to stop them from getting what they want is often tangled up in the flaw as well. So I think about those two things. I don't know if I've answered that. I can see other questions coming, mounting up. Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Okay, here is anonymous attendee. Do you only write one at a time? If not, how do you manage more than one? Great question. I'm terrible. I always want to write more than one at a time, and I often start by writing more than one. So for instance, at the moment, I have about half or so first draft of a verse novel for YA, and I'm stuck in that novel, and I know I need to go back and plan. This is me knowing I need to sort out the book, but that's sitting there for now, but I'm still thinking about it. I've just submitted a picture book text for my picture book publisher, and I'm just starting to think about my next adult book, which I think will be this thing to do with apple farms, maybe something about apple farms. So I am at different processes of 3 different stories, but I know at some point either the verse novel or the apple farm is going to pull harder. And when it pulls harder, then the other 2 books are going to have to just gently recede for a little while. And I'm going to have to focus more on the one book. But at this stage, where they're all kind of at different stages and they're not too intense, I can have 3. But at some point, one will take over. Okay. Besides setting, what else would a writer start with? Good question. And this is a question that, again, I've asked students lots and lots of times. How do you start your books? What is it that inspires you? And from my studies of this, and this is just me asking questions, I haven't done a proper study in this, but I've asked it a lot of times, I have found that most people seem to start with character. And that is probably because, for the most part, I teach writing for young people, and writing for young people is much more character-based than writing for adults, often, not always, but often. You often get that one strong character line in a novel for young adults or middle grade, and it's often character that brings the writers for young people to the page. And then I found that starting with the plot, with the story they want to tell, that's probably the second most common answer that writers give me. And those kinds of writers are generally the people who are like reading plot-based stories. So people who like reading science fiction or big high concept thrillers, murder, detective stories, that kind of thing. Their brain often works plot-wise. They like plot, they like the story. So that's how they will start as well. Then we often get the people who like to start with an idea. And those people are often the ones that like the sort of more literary type stories. And they want to write to work out what they think about something. So writing is a way to work out their thoughts. So you can start with an idea like, I don't know, what would it be if your child turned out to be a really bad person? How would you deal with that as a mother? That could be an idea that someone would want to write about. And then what else is there? Some people, and I think these people are the real true writer craftsmen, just like to play with words, just like to have that feeling of a sentence on the page and making that sentence as beautiful as possible, making that description as beautiful as possible. They're often the poets, or the pitch book writers could be like that too. So the ones that's just like playing with the craft of writing. And I often think they are the real true essence of the writers out there, but they often have to struggle a bit to find their plot. And I think it's worth trying to work out, where do you get your ideas from? Where do you start as a writer? Because if you know, like I know, that I start with place and setting is really strong for me, then I also know that I may have trouble finding things like plot later on down the line. So I will know that I have to pay a bit more of attention to finding the story. So one really good little exercise you can do to just see where you fit as a writer is find an object in front of you. Maybe you've got a pen in front of you, and write one sentence about that pen, however you want to write it. Opening of a story, doesn't matter. However you write that that sentence. And pay attention to how you've written that sentence. If it were me, I can almost guarantee you that I would say something like the pen sat on the desk. I'd put a setting in there straight away because that's how I think about things. Some of you may have put a character in. John picked up the pen on Tuesday, whatever. Some of you may have put in a plot already. The pen fell off the table. Oh, it's not much of a plot, but it is a plot. So just pay attention to where you naturally think about the world, because how you naturally think about the world is how you naturally think about stories, and is maybe where you get your inspiration, your ideas for in a story. Does that make sense? I can see we've come to the end of our questions, and we
Lucy,
are nearly at the end. Oh,
Lucy,
yeah.
can I have one student to Julia, right? Julia, what would you like to say?
How do you think of what setting you want to write about?
Yeah, so how do you think about what setting? Like, where do you get your inspiration from? How exactly? Because a setting's broad, it can be anything. So how do you narrow your focus?
Good question. That is a very good question, because often I don't know if it's going to be the right setting for the book, because it takes me, as I said, a really long time to write a novel. So sometimes I get a bit of stage fright. Is this the right setting? But as I said, it's through that process of unconscious writing and that daydreaming and just paying attention to the settings that keep coming up over and over again, the ones that I'm thinking of. So the fact that I keep thinking about this weird apple farm, that means that, okay, I'm interested in that. That's worth thinking about a bit more. And let's explore, let's play with that to see if it comes out. So it's just paying attention to you as a creative person and seeing where your creativity is going at the moment. Does that make sense?
Lucy, this is great. This has been fascinating to me because we hear a lot from authors, and you're one of the first for me that I've truly heard that focus so squarely on setting. And to hear you talk about different, like if you focus on plot and character, and I was like, oh my God, I'm saying just because I'm totally plot. I was like, the pen would be a murdering device in my world, like that would be me. So I know Penny thinks and I know her being writer, like
you are so plot oriented.
I am. And Penny's more character and setting. So I just think this
character and
setting. Your setting. Yeah. So this has been really fascinating and eye-opening for me. And I think for the students here and for everyone who attended. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I can't wait for release to come out because I'm going to read it, obviously. And I know our students here really enjoyed it. And you guys want to wave and say goodbye to Lucy and everything? Yay. We love you.
Bye, guys. Have a lovely day.
So thank you. And we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Good luck tomorrow. I hope it goes really well tomorrow.
Thank you. We have our fingers crossed. Thanks so much for doing this.
Pleasure. Yes. Very welcome.
All right.
Bye, guys. Stop recording, and then I'm going to close this off. So let me.
Okay. Bye.